Erev Tov Rabotai, we are continuing with our Mishnah Yomi, Masechet Batra. We are up to Perek Chet, Mishnah Hey. Today's Mishnah should be Le'ilui Nishmat, Neria ben Svetlana, Ranbai, Eliyahu ben Burcha Israelov, Chana bat Miriam, Sason ben Ryan, Yoshua ben Shifra, Menuchatam began Eden, Amen, and Abdi ben Chaim for the Refuah Shelemav, Daniel Shalom ben Rosa, Betor Shachol Israel, and Achlama Merav ben Amin, Otzion Chai ben Dvorah. As we have learned in this chapter, the Torah tells us the proper order of inheritance. This Mishnah discusses three cases where someone attempted to distribute his property to his heirs in a manner different from the one stated in the Torah and the law that applies in each case. The first case, Haomer ish ploni beni bechor lo yitol pishnaim. If someone says, so-and-so, who is my firstborn son, should not receive a double portion of my property, but should rather receive a share equal to each of my other sons. Ish ploni beni lo yirashi mechav, or if he says, so-and-so, who is my son, should not inherit me along with his other brothers at all. Lo amar klum, it is as if he has said nothing, and we do not follow his instructions. Sheidna al ma shekatuv b'Torah, for he has made a stipulation that is against what is written in the Torah. The Torah, when it taught the laws of inheritance, decreed that a firstborn son receives a double portion, and that all sons receive shares in their father's inheritance. The father does not have the power to change those laws and decide the inheritance should work in a different way. Although the general rule is that one can make a stipulation against the laws of the Torah when it comes to certain monetary matters. For example, one can sell an item for much more than the market price and stipulate that the buyer will not sue him for price fraud. That is because both parties agree to the stipulation and waive their rights to what they may be entitled under Torah law. In this case, the son who is being disinherited has not waived his rights, and even if he does not protest, we assume that he is being silent only so his father will not become upset. There is, however, a way for a person to give his property to others and thereby disinherit his Torah's heirs, as will be discussed in the Mishnah's next case. The second case, if someone who is seriously ill, who has the legal ability to distribute his property to his son simply by saying to whom he wishes to give his property. Now normally, when someone wishes to give a gift to another, the recipient must make a kinyan, an act of acquisition, in order to acquire the gift. However, when a seriously ill person, known as a shchiv merah, is dividing his property among his heirs because he fears that he is about to die, the sages made an exception and decreed that the words of the person have the power to transfer ownership of his property without any kinyan being necessary. They did this because they were afraid that the pain of not knowing whether his wishes would be carried out might cause the condition of the person to worsen. For this reason, a seriously ill person is referred to as one who can distribute his property with his mouth alone. In this case, if someone who was seriously ill was telling his heirs how he wished to divide his estate, and he gave more property to one son and less to another son, or he gave the firstborn son a share that was equal to that of the other brothers instead of a double share, his words stand. Since he is giving out his property as gifts while he is still alive, the recipients are receiving the property as gifts, not as inheritance. The Torah allows the person to give his property to whomever he desires. By dividing the estate in this way before his death, a person can give out his estate however he likes. In the first case of the Mishnah, the father's instructions are disregarded even if he issued them on his deathbed, when his words alone can transfer property, because he attempted to change the Torah's rules of inheritance, and he has no power to do so. In this case, though, he did not talk about inheritance at all. He simply gave away his property as deathbed gifts, which a shchiv merah is able to do. However, even in this case, if he said that he was giving the property out as inheritance, then it is as if he has said nothing, because the person cannot change the Torah's rules of inheritance like the Mishnah taught earlier. If when issuing his instructions, the father said that he was giving the property as inheritance rather than gifts, then he indeed wished to go against the Torah's laws of inheritance, and his instructions are not followed. And the Mishnah will explain which language is used for gifts and which is used for inheritance. The Mishnah explains how we can tell whether the father intended to give out his property as inheritance or as gifts. Katav ben batchila, ben ba'emtza, ben basof mishum matana. If he wrote, now the Mishnah uses the term wrote here, even though, as we said, the father has power to give these gifts simply by speaking, because it was common to record the instructions that they were spoken to make sure they could be carried out properly. So if he wrote either in the beginning or in the middle or the end of his instructions that the property was being given as gifts, the language of a deathbed distribution of the property could contain up to 3 terms to describe the transfer. So, for example, give this field to so-and-so as a gift, it shall be given to him. or so-and-so shall inherit this field as an inheritance, and let him inherit it. If, again, he wrote either in the beginning or the middle or the end of the instructions that the property was being given as gifts, Dvarav Kayamin, then his words stand. Even if some of the language used seems to indicate that he was distributing inheritance, as long as there is at least one mention of gift, whether it is in the beginning, the middle, or the end of his declaration, that's enough to treat it as a gift, and the distribution is valid. So give this field to so-and-so, as he will inherit it, is the case of a gift at the beginning. So-and-so shall inherit this field as a gift, and he shall inherit it, is the case of a gift in the middle, and so shall inherit this field, and it shall be given to him, is the case of a gift at the end. In all of these cases, even though one or more mentions of inheritance are included in the father's language, as long as there is a mention of a gift as well, we interpret the father's words as intending to give a gift, and not as making a stipulation against the Torah. The Mishnah's third case speaks of someone who attempts to disinherit his heir by giving his inheritance to a more distant heir. If someone says, so-and-so, a person that is not his child, shall inherit me, in a case where he has a daughter, or my daughter shall inherit me, in a case where he has a son, it is as if he has said nothing, because he has made a stipulation that is against what is written in the Torah. Giving inheritance to anyone other than a child when there is a daughter, or to a daughter when there is a son, is against the Torah's order of inheritance. Therefore, as in the Mishnah's first case, such instructions are disregarded. To this point, the Mishnah has followed the view that the order of inheritance as written in the Torah may not be changed at all, and an estate can be divided any other way if it is given out as gifts. The Mishnah now presents a different Tanaic opinion about this. Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka says a person does have the power to change the order of inheritance prescribed by the Torah to some extent. If he said it about someone who is fit to inherit him to some extent anyway, for example, if he bequeaths his property to one daughter among his other daughters or one son among his sons, then his words stand. But if he said it about someone who is not fit to inherit him, such as a daughter where there are sons or a brother where there are children, his words do not stand. According to Rabbi Yochanan ben Baroka, a father can change the laws of inheritance to a limited extent, as long as the person to which he wishes to give the extra inheritance would have inherited something anyway, and he just wishes to give that person a larger share, or even the entire estate. Rabbi Yochanan ben Baroka derives from the words of the verse in Dvarim, chapter 21, verse 16, and it shall be on the day that he distributes inheritance among his sons, that a father does have a limited ability to change how inheritance is distributed, but only among his sons, meaning only among the heirs who would be inheriting him in any case. Therefore, if there are several sons, the father can select one and give him more or less, and if there are only daughters, he can do the same. An exception to this is the firstborn son, because the Torah specifically says that he must be given his double portion. But even Rabbi Yochanan ben Baroka agrees that giving inheritance to a daughter where there is a son, or different relatives such as a brother where there is any child, is counter to the Torah's rules and may not be done. Rabbi Yochanan ben Baroka agrees that even this can be done if the property is given as a pre-death gift. Therefore, Rabbi Yochanan ben Baroka would disagree with the ruling stated at the end of the Mishnah's second case, that one who gives his son a greater or smaller share using language of inheritance has said nothing. In Rabbi Yochanan ben Baroka's view, one can give a son a smaller or larger share, or even no share at all, as long as he does this by giving the inheritance to his other sons. However, he would agree with the ruling of the Mishnah's third case, because even in his opinion, the father does not have a right to give inheritance to a daughter where there are sons, or to a brother or a stranger where there are daughters. He would also agree that the father may not take away the Bechor's double portion in any event, as we mentioned earlier. Now, Rabbi Yochanan ben Baroka also agrees with the ruling in the Mishnah's first case, that if the father declared that a certain son should not receive an inheritance, his words are ignored, although this would seem to be the same thing as disinheriting a son by awarding another son a greater share, which Rabbi Yochanan does allow. It is not the same, because even Rabbi Yochanan ben Baroka agrees that a person who declares that a son should not inherit is making a stipulation contrary to the Torah. Rabbi Yochanan only allows the father to award one of his sons a greater or smaller share, not to declare that a son is not an heir. But again, even Rabbi Yochanan ben Baroka agrees that someone who does not stand to inherit anything at all because there is a close heir may not be given inheritance except if it is a pre-death gift. And the Rav does tell us, V'alachak Rabbi Yochanan ben Baroka, the Halakha does follow the opinion of Rabbi Yochanan ben Baroka. The final section of the Mishnah discusses whether it is proper for a person to give his property away before he dies, so his children will not inherit it. It If someone writes gift documents that award his property to others and leaves his children without inheritance, Masha Sa'asui, what he has done is done, since the person may give his property during his lifetime to anyone he wishes. But the spirit of the sages is not pleased with them, meaning they do not approve of his actions, because it is not proper to leave children without an inheritance. Even if a person sees that his children are wicked, he should not do this, for perhaps his grandchildren will be righteous and they will be left without a legacy. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel Omer, but Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel says, Im lo ayu banav noagin kashura zachu letov. If his children were not acting properly, meaning they were wicked people, he is remembered for good if he does not leave them anything. And the halakha does not follow the opinion of Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel. And that is then of Mishnah Hey. Now the Torah teaches that a father has the legal right to identify a person as his son. The Gemara derives this from the verse in Devarim chapter 21 verse 17 that states that the father can recognize his firstborn son to give him the double portion. From the fact that the Torah did not simply state that the father gives the firstborn the double portion, we learn that the father has the power to legally identify a person as his son, even if others are not aware of his identity. This right, however, applies only to identifying his own child, not to identifying other relatives. Mishnah Vav discusses laws that are related to this right. If someone says, this person is my son, he is believed and the person will inherit him when he dies. Therefore, if there are other sons, he inherits a share along with them, and if there are no other sons, he inherits the entire estate as the closest heir. Also, if the father dies without any other known children, his widow is not subject to Yibum or Chalitza because he did not die childless. Just as a background, when a man who has brothers dies childless, his widow may not marry a man from the general population, but must either marry her dead husband's brother, Yibum, or perform the Chalitza ceremony with him in order to be permitted to marry another. Here, since the father identified his son before his death, he has not died childless, so the widow is not subject to these restrictions and may remarry without Yibum or Chalitza. Even if we already knew that the deceased had a brother, but did not know of any children, so until this point, the assumption was that the widow would be subject to Yibum, the father's identification of a son still exempts her. He is believed to exempt her even in such a case because if he had wished to, he could have released her from these restrictions by divorcing her before his death. Ze'achi eno ne'eman, but if he says, this person is my brother, he is not believed because the Torah gave a person the right to identify only his child. Therefore, unless there are witnesses to prove the claim, the identified person is not assumed to be his brother, and if the identifier dies without children or a father, the alleged brother does not inherit him, nor is his widow required to perform Yibum Chalitza with the quote-unquote brother. If there are no children and there are other brothers, the widow must perform Yibum Chalitza with one of the definite brothers. If there are no other brothers, she may marry anyone from the general population, as the dead husband is assumed to have had no brother, unless there are witnesses to prove that claim. The Mishnah notes, however, that identifying a person as one's brother does have one effect. V'notel imo b'chenko, and the alleged brother takes along with him in his portion of their father's estate. Since this person identified someone as his brother, he has in essence admitted that the person is entitled to share their father's estate as an equal heir. Therefore, should his own father die after the identification, he must give part of his own share in the father's estate to the man he identified as his brother, while any other brothers he has do not have to do so. Since he is not believed to identify the man as his brother, other heirs are not required to share their inheritance with them, because they can say to the alleged brother, prove that you are a brother and we will award you a proper share. The met yachzeru nechasim limkoman. But if the alleged brother dies after receiving that share of the estate, the properties return to their place with the brother who identified him. Since he was the only one who gave the alleged brother anything from the father's estate, it all returns to him if that alleged brother dies. So in the case, right, that's what the Mishnah says. To illustrate, the Mishnah, the notes give illustration in a case where there are three definite brothers, Reuven, Shimon, and Levi. And Reuven then identifies Yehuda as his third brother. Reuven must share his portion in their father's estate with Yehuda, while Shimon and Levi do not. So if the father left 12 fields in his estate, Shimon and Levi each receive 4 fields because they claim that there are only 3 brothers. In this case, none of the brothers was a firstborn entitled to double portion. Reuven also receives 4 fields, but he must give 1 field to Yehuda, since he has admitted that there are a total of 4 brothers. He is entitled to only 3 fields, and he has a field that does not belong to him, but to Yehuda. However, Yehuda cannot take the other 2 fields of his share from Shimon and Levi, because they can tell him, bring proof that you are a brother, and then you can take. But if this alleged brother dies, the property is returned to their place with the brother who identified them. So in this case, should Yehuda die without children, after receiving a field from Reuven, the entire field is returned to Reuven. Shimon and Levi cannot say, since according to you we were his brothers as well, we should inherit that field together with you, because Reuven can respond, if you agree that Yehuda was our brother, then the 2 fields of our father's estate that the 2 of you never gave him in the first place were also his as well. Take those as your portions in his estate. The Mishnah notes that this is true only of the property that the alleged brother received. This is true only of the property that the alleged brother received from the father's estate. Naflun nechasim makom acher, if property came to the alleged brother from another place, for example, if he received a gift or bought property and then he died without children, yirashu echav imo, the identifier's other brothers inherit that alleged brother's property along with him, although they never agreed that the deceased person was their brother. Since according to the identifying brother they were all brothers, he must share the legacy with them. Now this is different from the previous case, because here the property in question is new property that the identifying brother did not give to his alleged brother. So when Shimon and Levi claim that Reuven has already admitted that they are also Yehuda's brothers, he cannot retort that they already have a share of the property, and he must indeed divide it equally with them. However, this is only true if Shimon and Levi never explicitly denied that Yehuda was their brother. Rather, they claimed they didn't know and refused to give him anything without proof. If, however, they originally stated clearly that Yehuda was not their brother, they cannot claim any of his property, and Reuven would receive all of it. Now, the previous Mishnah discussed deathbed instructions of a seriously ill person, which have the power to transfer property even without a kinyan. This Mishnah teaches that merely writing down such instructions without issuing them has no effect. If someone dies and a deathbed will is found strapped to his thigh, this is nothing. Although the will contains the man's instructions regarding the distribution of his estate, it has no legal effect, because he neither gave the instructions nor gave the will to anyone while he was still alive. Therefore, he presumably intended his instructions to take effect with the transfer of the document, and once he has died, this cannot happen, because the document cannot serve to make a kinyan after his death. Therefore, the property is distributed to his heirs following the normal order of inheritance as stated in the Torah, and any gifts mentioned in the will are not given. Zika bala acher ben mina yoshin ben she'eno mina yoshin dvarav kaimin. But if he gave the deathbed will to another person before he died, whether that person is one of the heirs or not one of the heirs, then his words stand, and the instructions in the will are followed. As long as the person gave the will to someone else to acquire while he was still alive, it is the same as if he issued the instructions verbally, and the properties are awarded to the recipients listed in the will. As long as the person gave the will to someone else, we see that his intent was not that the kinyan should take effect with the documents, but rather as deathbed gifts. Therefore, the gifts mentioned in a document are valid, for a person may give his property to whoever he desires if he does it in the form of gifts, like we learned in the previous Mishnah. And the Mishnah makes the point that the will is valid, whether he gave it to an heir or a non-heir, to teach that even if he only gave the will to an heir who might be considered an extension of the ill person, it is considered to have left his possession, and this is enough to make the will valid. And that is the Nabotai of today's Mishnah Yomi. Baruch Adonai Le'olam. Amen v'amen.